coronavirus again, because we haven't talked about that enough
Uh,
in the past year. Why we're bringing this back up again is this story on CNN that it caught my attention for a couple of different reasons, which we'll get to. We'll talk about the actual specifics itself, but also am sort of curious how it ended up on CNN in the first place. So the CNN was doing a piece where they've interviewed a whole bunch of people that have been sort of experts in America related to the pandemic, etc. So was it Dr. Birx, Fauci, etc., etc. The one that sort of stood out was Dr. Robert Redfield, who they played a clip of, who basically was saying that it was his opinion. He was very specific about saying it was his opinion and in his experience that the coronavirus started in a lab and probably escaped from there. And he cited the reasoning for that is that his experience as a virologist was that it had too many characteristics out of the box to have just emerged from basically a jump from an animal host to a human host. It would have had to have stayed in a human host for longer to develop the transmissible characteristics that it had. At least that's essentially what he was getting across. So this isn't new. The lab theory, I guess, has been around for as long as the pandemic's been around. And I guess a lot of it has got to do with the fact that it's still shrouded in mystery exactly how this whole thing started. I guess it's just, I guess, bringing in what I was just mentioning then about CNN and them broadcasting this at this point is that I don't know if that, again, I'm going to use this term loosely because, them being mainstream media, I don't know if they've really actually broadcast this sort of thing before during the actual pandemic in such a big way, and it makes me wonder why they're doing it now. So there's a whole lot to unpack there, I guess. There's a whole lot to talk about there.
well, yeah, I mean, this goes all the way to the whole concept of what is news in the modern age. I mean, is it a story that you think's going to basically get a lot of clicks or a lot of attention and a lot of sharing with your masthead on it? Probably. News has changed so much in the digital age that we can no longer be sure of what's news and what isn't. That's not to say that this isn't news or the theory or opinion isn't valid, but, the reasons that we see things now on mainstream news or niche news channels is because people want us to see it. And the reasons for that come down to sort of popularity, I think, or interest more than the original intention of journalism, which was in the public interest. So, it's quite an interesting theory. There's certainly, some basis for it, but it's also borderline conspiracy because you can't prove it to be true. And that's what every good conspiracy theory is based on. Something that seems likely, something that seems plausible, but there's no way that we're going to be able to tell for sure.
And that makes me wonder why they've, chosen to do this at this time, particularly as, the CNN in particular has been trying to, fight against fake news, as they call it. But at the same time, it just, I'm not passing judgment there as to whether they're actually doing that or not, but that's their claim. And I'm not saying specifically that Redfield's opinion is fake news either, because he did say it was his opinion. He didn't say that he wasn't trying to pass it off as fact like a lot of others might have done. But I just find it curious that with all the swirling around of everything that's spoken about in the news, etc., and how all these things sort of play out and all of that, I don't know if it's helpful to put that sort of thing out there when, like you said, there's nothing to prove it at this point.
I guess the thing that's interesting in this case is that the investigation that's occurred really hasn't been able to shed any light for whatever reason on the origins, except that we know where it started. And that's, obviously something happened in that geographical region which led to the virus, I guess, effectively becoming strong enough to move out. Redfield's opinion is that the fact that it was able to infect enough people to sort of propagate itself, shows it has certain characteristics. But outside of that, we don't know how or why. And I think this is one of those things, when you have an absence from a report, an official report that doesn't really give you any answers, then I guess it's fair to allow people like Redfield, who's, obviously an expert, to voice theirs.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I guess just to tie it off, though, I mean, it would obviously be helpful to know how it started, so that you could get a sense of, okay, this is how it started, so we could maybe put in some preventative measures, I guess, for the future, if that is even possible. But at the end of the day, is it by this point, with so many people infected, so much of a significant impact having occurred on the planet, is it more of a moot point now that whether or not we know it, because the emphasis is really on about containing it and stopping further spread of the infection?
I'm cynical, Ben. I'd just say it's got to do with litigation, but who knows? I mean, somebody's going to have to pay.
Yeah.
So isn't that what this is really about?
So we got to find someone to blame for it to get out of control the way it did.
Well, I'm not saying that, but that could be one motivation. I mean, personally, I think there's no shortage of virologists who understand virology. I mean, that's their job. We know how viruses move between animals and humans quite well, and we know, exactly as Redfield says, what sort of characteristics, et cetera, that a virus needs to thrive. And, the only reason you would want to know exactly how a virus came into existence is these days is one, there's obviously a scientific question, but also, like I say, it seems to me to be more about litigation and liability.
Well, I mean, it did cost a little bit, didn't it?
That's exactly what I mean.
All right, we might wrap it up there. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. Part of me was is kind of hoping, or was kind of yearning for a desire to return to that sort of old school journalism that would just focus on where the actual bring us the news kind of thing. And I just feel like even if any of that was news, it's so swallowed by so much other noise and hysteria and all that you almost can't listen to any of it until something absolutely concretely definitive is actually brought out there with evidence.
That's right. The news is there is no news on this. And so, in any vacuum, people always step in to fill it up.